All right, everybody, so we are going to go ahead and build a table. And we're going to build an actual kind of nice and fancy table to go with our nice little chairs. And it's going to look something like this. So I want it to have a tabletop with nice sweeping edges, a skirt with sweeping edges, legs with sweeping edge. I want the support on the inside to have 4 little supports. I want it to be inset, and I want it to be funky. These sweeped edges are a semicircle cut off the corner and then sweeped to the center of each side, and I want it to be symmetrical. So this is a really complicated shape and kind of a very big thing, but it's actually cut out pieces of a simpler shape. So if we think about how we would build this if it were a real table, or how we would build it in SketchUp, those are very similar. Things like the tabletop is 3/4 of an inch because we generally have 3/4 inch material, or that these 1x4s are probably either 4 or 3.5 inches and not much bigger. The actual table is built with the top and then the skirt pieces line up here, inset 2 inches on each side, and the legs actually sit inside them. So that's how we're gonna make it. And we're gonna make all these fun shapes later. So I'm gonna build it very simply out of components so that our work with all these shapes is gonna be a lot easier a little bit later. So let's go ahead and start that. The actual SketchUp model that I'm working in right now is the same one that I built these chairs in, and I want to show you that if you make a lot of guidelines, you don't have to grab the eraser tool and individually erase them. You can go to Edit, Delete Guides, and go ahead and clear everything out at once. That can be a great time saver. So we're going to start on our table with just an overall bounding box of what the table is going to be in. So I'm going to drag the box this way, and notice that my longer number is first. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 4 foot, 15 inches, and hit enter. Grab the push-pull tool and bring that up 36 inches. It's going to be the bounding box of our table. Now, what I really want is the top of this box and the bottom of this box. So I'm going to go ahead and take the eraser tool and just erase the corners. And as you notice, when I erase those corners, the actual surfaces of the sides just disappear. Now grab our selection tool again, double click this top, and now it's all by itself, and I'm going to right click and make it a component. When you make something a component, you can rename it. You can name it table top if you would like, but it's not really necessary. Make sure it says glue to none, and make sure it's clicked replace with selection with component. Otherwise you're making a component that's going into your component library, which is a whole other rigmarole, and it's not actually in your model right now. So go ahead and click create, and now to edit it, to use the push-pull tool, if I click P, it won't let me edit it. That's because I have to double-click to get inside the component. So I'm going to grab it, pull it down, and type in 3/4 of an inch. Now it's the right size. I'm going to grab my selection tool again and click out because our top is done for right now. We're going to edit it more later, but for right now it's done. So let's go ahead and make that skirt coming off of it. I'm going to rearrange so I'm looking at the bottom of the tabletop and grab my tape measure tool. I'm going to pull in from the sides 2 inches on each side because 2 inches was a popular measurement in our chair, so why not stick with it? Okay. And now, because this side of the skirt and this side of the skirt are the same or will be the same, I'm going to go ahead and make that a component as well because it's something I'm going to replicate. So I'm looking in my bottom corner, and this is 3 foot 8 inches by the depth of whatever I make it. So I can either carefully line that up till it's 3/4 of an inch, just like that, and carefully don't move my mouse and click. Or I could type in the measurement. I'll do that for the next one. So I'm going to hit the space bar, double click while it's a flat object, right click, and hit make component. Create. Now I could also make a component with this button right up here. I'll do that with the next one as well. I'm going to double click inside, grab the push-pull tool, and pull it down 3.5 inches. Spacebar for the selection tool, click out to exit. Now I'm going to make the side skirt. So again, I can do this a different way. I'm going to go ahead and overlap this other piece that I've created. Because it's a component, I won't stick to it. So I'm going to click and drag out, and this time it's this measurement, the thickness measurement first, and then 11 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and click to make a box, and then type 3/4 of an inch by 11 inches, enter, and that's the right size. I'm going to grab the selection tool with the space bar. I'm going to select it. When I select it, I have to click 2 times, but not 3 times, because 3 times might select these components. It doesn't because there's no excess geometry, but you want to do 2 times. Then I'm going to click the component button, and I get the same menu. Click create. Double click on it to enter that component. Grab the push-pull tool with the P key, and now I'm going to reference this skirt because they're the same height. I'm going to grab the space bar and click out. So I have my 2 skirt pieces. Now I'm going to go ahead and replicate my components while I'm here to go ahead and finish out that top piece. So I'm going to grab the move key and grab the relevant corner. I'm going to grab this corner, this piece, and put it right here. So I want to make sure I grab the right corner. I'm going to tap the control key so it's a copy and let it go. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Once again, the relevant corner is over here. When you're using the move tool, you should space bar for the selection tool, select the whole object, and then M key to select the corner that you want to move. I'm going to tap control again so it's a copy, place it right up against that corner, and click. Now I've got an enclosed, copied skirt that will be symmetrical to my tabletop. Now I'm going to make the legs. And when I was talking about the legs being a little complicated, that's because they are. So I'm going to take the leg, and what I really want to do is place it right here. But other than freehanding and looking terrible, I'm going to use guidelines. So I'm going to pull a guideline out from each of these up against the bottom of the table, and I'm going to make them 3/4 of an inch. Now, that one snapped to 3/4 of an inch because I've made a 3/4 of an inch measurement several times now. I'm trying to find a nice direction where you can see what's going on here. But another thing I want to show you is that if I were to take my line and say, oh, I'm making something right here, oh yay, happy day, this line right here is not 3/4 of an inch. It's 1 1/16. And that is too wide for the lumber that I have. So I need that to be 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to grab the tape measure tool, and I'm going to connect those 2 sides, and I connect these 2 sides. And what that means is now I get the center. So I'm going to pull out 3/8 of an inch, which is half of 3/4, if you didn't know. So I'm going to go out both ways, 3/8 of an inch. Now when I draw this line from this intersection to this intersection, it will be 3/4 of an inch. I will admit that was a lot of nerdy builder math that you probably don't know. I'm also going to make a guideline off this guideline, which by the way you can do. You don't have to use a real line from geometry to do it. And I'm going to make it 3.5 inches. Now I just pulled out to 3.5 inches, but just like everything else, you can look at it and tap 3.5 inches. Now I'm going to grab the line tool and I'm going to make it. Now some of you might be thinking, why isn't she using the rectangle tool? And I'll show you why. Because if I use the rectangle tool, it's trying to make a rectangle on the axis that we're in. So in order to make this rectangle, I would have to change the axis of our entire document and then change it back if I wanted a normal square. Now that doesn't always affect you, but sometimes for just one little piece, you don't want to go changing the axis for your whole project. Also, this is why I showed you the change guide or delete guides, because for this one piece, I have a dozen guides on the screen, and it can get really cumbersome. So I'm going to, once again, double click, right click, and make component. Great, now I have a leg. I'm going to enter that leg and push pull and pull it out until it's the height of our ground. It's a little hard to see right now, but there it is. There it's the height of my ground. I'm going to click. We're good. I'm going to hit the space bar, click out of that component, and spend some time flipping me back around to the right side of the world. There we go. I groan like it's actually difficult, but it's not because it's a computer. Edit, delete guides. Now, to get the other legs in the same position that this one is, I'm actually going to grab this and make guides to the corners, and then pay attention to where this guide is. This guide is 1 3/8 inch in from the edge. So I'm going to make this guide 1 3/8 of an inch in, and this one is the same, 1 3/8 inch from the edge. So I'm going to do it as well, 1 3/8. You see how the SketchUp again said, oh, I think I know what you want, and it was right. So I'm going to grab this leg, and first of all, I want to keep the orientation of this leg the same, because once I cut it out in a pretty form, I want it to be in the right place. So I'm going to grab it and tap copy and move it this way. And now I'm going to look at the bottom of it, and when these turn up, I'm going to hover over one of them so I get the rotation tool, click, and spin till it faces exactly the opposite tick. And I'm actually looking at, when I click on it, I'm looking at where the protractor lines are, and I'm doing the same line on the opposite side. And you'll feel when you click on it, every time you move, it wants to tick a whole section at a time. So I'm gonna let that happen. Now I'm gonna zoom in and get it, grab the move key and get it situated right on those two guidelines. The other thing you can do is, again, when I talked about moving, you don't have to move an actual piece of the component. You can grab that edge of the component and stick it on the intersection. Okay, I'm going to do that again, and it seems like a little bit of hard work. It seems like, why don't you just take it and do something else? And the reason being, I want this edge to be the outside edge for each leg, so that when I cut them apart as components, they look the same. So I'm going to grab these two this time, and I'm going to move them, and I'm going to grab them and tap the control key and just move them back. Now both of them are facing the opposite direction, so I could rotate both of them at the same time and just switch their places. There's another thing I can do though. I can grab the scale tool and I can invert them. And by doing that, I'm just going to grab the center point and pull the other way. And I need to make sure, if you look in the bottom right hand corner, it says negative 6.61. I need to make that -1. Hit enter. And now it's exactly inverted on itself. It's exactly mirrored. So I'm going to grab the move tool, grab the end point in the component, and put it on the line. And now they should both be in the same spot, because if the front two are in the same spot, these two should be in the same spot. And they look pretty good. So we're going to go with that. So that's where our legs will be. Okay? And now we're going to go edit, delete glides, just so that that stuff doesn't get in our way. Selection, click on the bottom so that nothing's selected. And now I'm going to grab the tape measure tool. I'm going to bring our little support piece in from the inside of the legs 2 inches. So I'm going to go there and then come in 2 inches. I'm going to do the same over here. I'm going to come here, and I'm going to come in 2 inches. And I'm going to do that on each side. Whoop. I'm going to make sure I got to touch it, because if I don't anchor that on that edge, it will not be happy with me. And yes, I know this means that the bottom piece is very small, and that is correct. And you can see that time my thing snapped to it. I will say that that looks smaller than I would like, but I'll fix that later. Now I'm going to grab the push-pull tool and pull it up, and I'm going to make that 10 inches high, because that's how far off the ground I said I wanted that support piece before. And now I'm going to go ahead and grab the eraser tool and delete the ground. And delete the bottom, because I don't need it anymore. What I do need is the bottom of this box though, so I'm going to grab the line tool, complete one edge, grab the push-pull tool, and push up. And I am going to go ahead and push all the way up. No, I'm not. I can't tell where I need to push it to. I know with math that I need to push it up 9 1/4 inches, so I could go like this and go 9.25 inches. and it'll take it, and I know that's 3/4 of an inch. The other thing I could do is I could grab the tape measure tool and pull down 3/4 of an inch and make a line and then pull up to that. So either of those are completely possible. I like to err on the side of less math, and I'm sure you would like to do that as well. Okay, so the last piece that we need is the one connecting this piece to this piece. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to make a line on one of the legs. We're going to double click on the leg and get into one of that component. We're going to make the tape measure come up 10 inches because we know that the top of this is at 10 inches, right? And we're going to come down from that 3/4 of an inch. We're going to come down from that 3/4 of an inch. There we go. And that's where we're going to make a line. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's fine. I was going to say we should not do this in the leg component because it's a separate thing, but we can build them at the same time. That's not a problem. So I'm going to make a rectangle on that surface. Now I want to point something out. Do you notice how it's allowing me to make a rectangle in this way? That's because actually every component has its own axis, and that can get a little confusing. So just roll with it because it's trying to help you. We're going to make that 3.5 inches, and this is another one of those times that I'm just going to move it until it says 3.5 and click. I'm going to push pull and pull it until these two pieces touch each other like that. So our lovely legs now have a connector to the center piece, to the center support piece. Also, I want to point out that we made those guidelines right there, and they're in all 4 legs. They're in all the components. So you notice how it's making a really, it's making a Union Jack, or it's making a really interesting pattern. So that's one of the reasons we want to make sure we delete guides every once in a while. Otherwise, we're just going to get a whole lot of stuff in the way. Now, when I said before that this is a little smaller than I'd like it to be, it's a little smaller than I'd like it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and take the push-pull tool, and I'm going to pull it out an extra inch. And I'm going to go ahead and do that on all sides. So after I did it once, I'm just going to double-click. Whoop. I'm just going to double-click on the other sides, but I need to make sure I'm selecting those sides. When I said whoop and Control-Z, I was still selecting the first side for some reason. All right, so that's a little better, okay? So that's our table, very simply. The other thing we want to do is that our tabletop is actually going to be 4 sides of a tabletop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click to get in this component, take our tape measure, make a guideline to the center and a guideline to the center. I'm going to grab my push-pull tool, and I'm going to take this side, I'm going to push it to that guideline. I'm going to take this side, I'm going to push it to that guideline. I know this looks really weird. Bear with me. I grab the selection tool. I'm going to click out. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to click back in, and I'm going to take the eraser tool, and instead of erasing that side, that does not work, right? Control-Z. I am actually going to hold shift and erase that side. And what that's actually doing is just hiding geometry, not erasing it. But when I'm done, I don't want those lines to appear. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and just hide it. So now I'm going to take this. First of all, it's still really big. I'm wondering if there's hidden geometry somewhere that's keeping it so big. But we'll look for that later. I'm going to grab the, I'm actually going to grab the protractor tool, and I'm going to grab the center of this piece. Just like the move tool, the protractor tool can replicate things. So I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to grab this corner here. Oh. Selection tool, select. rotate. Oh, I grabbed the tape measure protractor tool instead of the rotate tool. And so I'm going to click the center, I'm going to click the extreme, and I'm going to start to rotate. And in addition to rotating, I can hit copy and get a copy. So I'm going to rotate it until it's perfectly over here, and now I get the opposite corner. I'm going to take my selection tool. Oh, I hit Control Z and I need it to redo. And I want to make sure I have both of those selected. So I just moved it, but I'm going to undo so that they're in the same place. And now I'm going to copy paste, and I'm going to rotate them 90 degrees. That's not, I need to flip it. Control Z, I'm going to grab this and I'm going to flip it center to center. Make sure it says -1. And there we go. Now I'm going to grab those two items with the move key, grab the relevant corner, which in this case is in the middle because I want that relevant corner to match there. Okay. Now I know that that pretty much looks like exactly the same thing that we had before, except there's a little lineage going on in here because SketchUp is telling us that they're different. But this is actually necessary, and I'll show you why right now. So we're going to double click on one of these components, and we're going to grab the arc tool, and I'm just going to make a freehand arc for example purposes, and I'm going to grab the push-pull tool, and I'm going to cut it out. And now look, that cut is on every corner. That's why we made it a component, that's why we made it a quarter of the table, and that's why we cut it all the way out. So I'm going to undo that. All right, so now is the complicated part. I bet you're like, no! Okay, let's do the 2 inches again. 2 inches, 2 inches. We're gonna make a curve that cuts out here and a curve that does this. So for that, let's go ahead and also do 1 inch and 1 inch, okay? So our curve here is gonna go from this corner to this corner and is gonna come out until my cursor touches that intersection. And that'll mean a nice consistent corner. Push pull, cut it out. I want to make sure that my leg doesn't show when I cut this out either. So now I'm going to take this curve and I'm going to give, actually let's do the tape measure tool again. I want to give this some space. I want to give it about 3/4 of an inch on each side so that I'm not starting my curve right at that edge. And now I want to do a nice graceful curve in here. So I'm going to do an arc, a 3-point arc, which means I'm going to click here, click in the middle, and click to there. I don't like the way that looks. Click, click, nope. So I'm going to make it shallower. I click here, and I click here. I don't like how any of that looks. Okay. I think 1 inch is too deep. 1/2 inch. Yes. So I'm going to grab the 3-point arc again. Click, click, click. Well, that looks silly on this side. Click, click, and click back up to the 1 inch mark and do a straight line from there to the center. That way, those two look like they're supposed to meet when they do that. We are going to do the 1/2 inch over here, and this time hopefully we'll use it. Evidently I lost my 3/4 inch line over here. So we'll go ahead and start our 3-point curve here. Go to the 1 inch line and come back down to the 1/2. And then we're going to make it a curve going the other way from the 1/2 to the 1 inch line. And what I want to do is make sure it doesn't go off the edge. I don't want this curve to come out too far. And then we're going to come in the inward direction until we meet the end, like that. And now I'm going to, now I should note that it's not a push-pullable surface. This surface we can get rid of, we can cut away. This surface we can't, because something happened that it was not coplanar. And that might be because one of our drawing baselines wasn't on an edge somewhere. We're not sure. So I'm just going to make another line up. There we go. And make sure they're all on the edge. And that's probably because I wasn't careful enough, or this line did go over the edge. And because there's this extra little bit, I'm just going to cut it off. Okay. Now, if I want to make this look really pretty, I'm going to hold Shift again and delete those lines, those curved lines, so that it doesn't look as segmented, as nice and curvy. And now we have a nice curved top without any excess lines. I'm going to double click in there again and get rid of this line on the edge. And how to do that again is the eraser and the Shift tool to hide that geometry. I should point out that if we go Edit, Delete Guides, it cleans it up a little bit, and also that if I also go to View Hidden Geometry, I can see all those lines that I deleted and all those edges that I hid. They're not gone, they're still there. They're just hidden in Hidden Geometry. So I'm going to go and unclick Hidden Geometry so that we don't see it anymore. So that's our tabletop. And we're just going to do things like that again and again. Now, we could, if we wanted to, for these two skirts, do the same thing where we split it into 4 pieces, or in this case 2, so that they're definitely symmetrical. But I am just going to work on one skirt. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and select this leg and hide them. So I'm going to right click on them and click hide. This way I can see the ends of my component the way I couldn't before. So I'm going to grab the tape measure tool and pull the tape measure just to the midpoint. So instead of doing a bunch of these, I'm just going to duplicate it on both sides. I don't think it's necessary for me to go through all the effort of copying this component when it's not going to be that hard for me to draw. So I'm going to come in from this side 5 inches. And 5 inches from the other side, and the midpoint line. I'm going to come up from the bottom 1 3/4 looks just fine. So I'm going to make an arc. I'm going to make an arc like that. Whoop. I need to use guidelines or you're not going to know what measurements I have in my head. I'm going to do 2 inches again, because 2 inches sounds like a fun time. 2 inches. This time when I make the arc, I'm going to use the center point arc, and I'm going to click each side, and you see how it turns blue? Boop, boop, boop. Come on. Just see how it turns blue? It turns blue when it's on a good tangent to another line. It's not wanting to turn blue in the opposite direction. So I'm looking down at bulge and it says 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and click 1/2 inch. It's because there's no line up there. So I'm going to do the same line over here, 1/2 inch. And I'm also going to draw a straight line, pull that down 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to want to make a curve that curves down and out and comes back to kind of be straight right here. So I'm going to do my 3-point curve and come down and then come back out. And I don't really care what that is. It's fine if you kind of make it up. The other thing is I do want it to curve back down over here. So I'm going to add a second line over here and just make it match up. Now that it's matched up, I'm going to grab the eraser tool and erase that. And now it's going to make one continuous curve. Except the curve looks like poo. Rule number 2, don't make it look like poo. So I'm gonna do that. None of those are good. Eraser. But now that curve is too much. So maybe you should just make it look good. So essentially that second line I drew was just terrible, is what I'm telling you. But now that I've got that all worked out, I'm going to select all 3 of those line segments by holding Shift and clicking on them. I did not click on other things. I'm going to copy, paste. Hey, look at copy, paste. Ain't that a great thing? I'm going to make sure that I'm clicking on the surface somewhere else. And now they're selected. Now I'm going to grab this scale tool, and I can do the same thing I did before. I'm going to invert it, and I'm going to make sure it says -1, enter, and then grab the move tool, grab the end, stick it on there. And I should touch over here. Let's see if I do. I definitely do. I know I do because this is one solid surface that I can extrude out. Extrude out away. Awesome. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did over there, over here. And because I'm doing the same thing, now that I've double clicked on this surface, I'm going to hit paste. And I'm going to make this little section a group. I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to regret that. I'm not going to be able to easily cut that out. I'm not going to easily be able to turn it and make it coplanar, and that's going to be more of a pain in the butt than just drawing this again. So I'm going to go 5 inches, and that's what I thought. Because I'm very close to the center here, I'm just going to end up making a little semicircle. Just gonna end up making it. So I'm going to grab my tape measure and just do 2 inches from both sides. I'm going to make my face style x-ray because I want to see this corner come out 2 inches. Went the wrong way. I want this face right here, 2 inches. There we go. Click the end, and pull up and make a bulge. I'm going to turn x-ray back off so you can see what so it's not as confusing. But I just made a curve with the arc tool. Now I'm going to push it out. There we go. So this part gets really hard to see. So if you want to hide that other leg again, that's perfectly fine. I would recommend it. Also, since I didn't delete guides from the other apron, it's also really hard to look at. So edit, delete guides. And now I'm going to bring back those 2 legs. So to bring them back, I go View, Hidden Geometry. Now I'm going to right-click on those items and say Unhide. Right-click, Unhide. All right. So that's all nice and pretty. Now we're going to prettify our legs, double-click on it, and you're just going to do the same thing we have been doing. Here's another thing that you can do. If this becomes really hard to look at, and you can do this for your top pieces as well, grab the Move tool, click on it, make a copy, and move it out into the middle of nowhere. Now that it's in the middle of nowhere, it's easier to see all the stuff that you want to see. You can draw straight on it, and it will, of course, be affected just like the other components. So I want to cut that out. And again, go ahead and just make up something that looks kind of pretty. If you want to follow, I forgot I was using the 3-point thing. If you want to follow what I'm doing, you can make, I'm just trying to make some curves that go both in and out. One of the things you should notice is that you get this blue line, and that blue line is keeping it, like I said before, it was keeping it tangent, and that's quite useful. I'm going to make this a piece that like just arcs out here and supports the underside of the centerpiece. You want to make sure that while you're doing this, you're drawing on the 2-dimensional surface. You're drawing on the surface of this, because if you make a loop that comes straight out, it's not going to help you. Also, if you overlap That's absolutely fine. As we talked about, because SketchUp has sticky geometry, it's gonna force all these things to work for you. So if I erase this and erase this, that's all one unit, and that's fine. So that's a pretty back side of the leg, and now I'll do the front side of a leg. Curve this way, and then a more sweeping curve this way, and I'm going to follow this in. Again, the accuracy of how you draw this leg is not going to be a big deal, just that you make it curvy and pretty, because I think trying to replicate this kind of look is fine. I want you guys to be able to make some two-dimensional shapes. If you decide that this is going to be a lot more, just making something up will be a little bit easier than trying to replicate all of these things that I'm drawing exactly. Grab your push-pull tool, push out all that extra stuff. You may need to turn. That last one got a little difficult for me because the computer is having a hard time knowing which way I'm trying to go. So that interesting looking leg on our table looks like that. And that's great. Now I can just delete this extra component because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to go ahead and make this guy on the bottom a little more interesting. I never made him a component, so he's not angry with me. And I don't have to double click to get inside, so I just go ahead and make it. And because I did the same thing over and over, I'm relying on SketchUp to make my corners. There we go. I am going to grab the tape measure tool and pull it to the midpoint. And I'm going to go ahead and make a very simple, actually I'll grab my tape measure tool and I will also go 5 inches in on both sides. That way it does still have some symmetry. And I'm going to grab my arc tool and I'm going to click on both these intersections and then pull it up just a little bit. Same on the other side. And pull it up just a little bit. Push-pull tool, cut it out. And now all that looks like a fancy intentional table. While we're at it, I'm going to get stuck in a SketchUp figure. While we're at it, I want you to remember that you can do the same thing with a chair like this. You can do the same thing with any individual object that you're playing with. If you have some uncomfortable or awkward geometry, like this line right here, again, you can't delete it, but you can hide it. And now it's not as noticeable. Remember to delete all your guides before you turn in your project, and remember to name it properly. But this is a nice, fancy, complicated table that really wasn't that complicated to make. But it uses some basic principles that SketchUp has that we've learned to try and make a complicated shape. We used components to make sure things didn't stick to each other and make it so we didn't have to make multiple legs or surfaces. We made a perfectly symmetrical top and perfectly symmetrical apron to this table by using components. We used the rotate and tool, we used the move tool, we used the rectangle, line, and tape measure tool extensively, and we also learned how to mirror things. So I hope you're able to take those skills into your next projects. Thank you.